The Phantom Train of Boston. In the cold, foggy night of January 10, 1856, a train departed from Andover, Massachusetts, bound for Boston. The train was heavily laden with passengers, many of them factory workers heading home after a long day. The weather had turned treacherous, with freezing rain turning the tracks into a slick, icy ribbon winding through the dark New England landscape. As the train approached a steep grade near the town of North Andover, the engine began to struggle. The passengers inside could feel the train slowing, the wheels screeching against the steel rails. Suddenly, without warning, the train slid backward, the cars clattering as they hurtled down the incline. The engineer, William Brown, fought desperately to regain control, but the brakes were useless against the ice. The train gained speed, the wind howling through the gaps in the windows, and the passengers clung to their seats in terror. Then, in a sickening twist of fate, the train derailed, crashing down an embankment and into a frozen river below. In the chaotic aftermath, many of the passengers were killed or gravely injured. Rescue efforts were hampered by the icy conditions and the remote location of the crash. Those who survived spoke of the eerie silence that followed the accident, the only sound being the hiss of escaping steam and the groans of the wounded. But the horror didn't end there. In the weeks following the disaster, residents of North Andover and nearby towns began to report strange occurrences near the crash site. Some claimed to hear the sound of a train whistle echoing through the night, even though no trains were scheduled to run at those hours. Others spoke of ghostly figures wandering along the tracks or standing silently by the riverbank. One particularly chilling story came from a local farmer who insisted he had seen a full apparition of the derailed train, its cars shattered and smoking, slowly gliding over the tracks as if retracing its final journey. He described seeing pale faces pressed against the windows, mouths open in silent screams. Over time, the legend of the Phantom Train of Boston grew, with many avoiding the area after dark. To this day, there are those who claim that on cold, foggy nights, the ghost train can still be seen, its whistle piercing the night as it endlessly retraces its tragic route.
The Great Train Wreck of 1918. I was there on that fateful day, July 9th, 1918. The date etched into my memory forever, as it was the day of the Great Train Wreck, one of the deadliest train disasters in the history of the United States. The morning began like any other. I had boarded the number 4 passenger train in Chicago, heading south. It was supposed to be a routine journey, but the weather had other plans. A thick, oppressive fog had settled over the tracks, reducing visibility to almost nothing. We were crawling through the haze, the foghorns of our train and others blaring intermittently to warn of our presence. The delay began to stretch as we approached Nashville. The crew informed us that we were to wait for the number 1 train to pass. Number 1 was a fast passenger train, known for its punctuality. But that day, the schedule and the signals were not cooperating. The fog played tricks on every signal light, and communication errors compounded the problem. I remember sitting by the window, trying to peer through the murkiness, when the train suddenly jolted. The screech of metal against metal was deafening, followed by a shattering crash that seemed to tear through my very soul. I was thrown from my seat, and the world around me became a chaotic blur of flames and twisted steel. The impact was catastrophic. The number 1, having received incorrect signals, had plowed into the rear of our stationary train. The force of the collision was immense, and within moments the wreckage was engulfed in a fiery explosion. I could see flames licking up from the tracks, a horrifying, uncontrollable blaze that consumed both trains. Panic swept through the cars. People screamed and cried. their voices mingling with the roar of the fire and the groans of the wounded. I remember trying to find an escape, but the wreckage was a tangled mess of iron and broken wood. Many passengers were trapped, their cries for help piercing through the roar of the flames. Rescue efforts were nothing short of heroic, but tragically hindered by the intensity of the fire and the scale of the destruction. Emergency crews, arriving on the scene, worked tirelessly to pull survivors from the wreckage and tend to the injured. I watched as they labored against the inferno, their faces grim and determined. The heat was overwhelming, and the smoke made breathing nearly impossible. The day passed in a haze of confusion and terror. As night fell, the full extent of the disaster became clear. Over 100 lives had been claimed by the wreck, with many more injured. The scene was one of utter devastation, scattered debris, smoldering remains, and the haunting silence of those lost. In the days that followed, the wreckage was cleared, and the survivors slowly began to piece their lives back together. But the memory of that day, the sheer horror of the collision and the subsequent inferno, stayed with me and countless others. It serves as a grim reminder of the perils of rail travel in an era when safety protocols were still in their infancy. The Great Train Wreck of 1918 remains one of the deadliest train accidents in American history. It was a tragedy that not only took many lives but also changed the way we approach rail safety, ensuring that such a catastrophe would never happen again.